Hi, hello. I'm doing a live today and wanted to speak to you about the pelvic floor and why I think every woman should be listening to this and taking this information in, because I think it's a very, very important area for us women. Yes, male also have a pelvic floor, in case you didn't know that. They do, but it's a bit different for them. And I'll explain you why. Okay, so basically the pelvic floor is the area that sits between your legs. Okay, essentially it's just those muscles that support your lower organs that are so important in holding everything together. Okay, now particularly as we get a bit older, regardless if you had children or not, okay, obviously like I say, I'm addressing here the women because I'm a midwife, and so this is what I do, and I deal with women, and that's fine. But like I say, I think regardless if you're pregnant or not, I think, or if you've ever had children, if you've given birth naturally or not, I think this is information that is valid for every single woman. Okay, so I think everyone should be listening to this. So, like I was saying, with age, okay, those muscles, like I say, essentially they're just muscles and ligaments that keep everything together, in place. So that is your uterus, is your bladder, is the lower part of your intestines. So everything needs to be held together throughout your life, because otherwise, if that doesn't happen, then and it just leads to prolapse of different things. So I have seen some horrible uterine prolapses in my life, absolutely horrendous. There isn't much you can do about it. They just have to take it out if it gets to really late stages. I have seen urinary incontinence. Unfortunately, it's very common, particularly with old age, and pelvic floor that is not very strong can lead to that as well. In fact, there are some other things as well that could potentially lead to incontinence, but those aside. The other thing is bowel incontinence as well. Well, that happens as well, being unable to control your bowel movement, or fluctuances as well. Okay, so it can impact us in many ways, all right, and not in a good way. So it's really important to keep that area nice and strong and to look after it. Okay, and particularly when you're after 30, I would say, it's important to be mindful of it, because after that age your muscles tend to get a bit looser. All right, so it's more likely that you then have problems, like I say. So, what I would advise you to do, yes, there's lots of people, obviously the first thing that comes to mind is Kegel exercise. Yes, indeed, those do help, but that's not the only thing that you need to be mindful of. It is really important that you try to look after yourself in so many different ways, okay? And one of them is actually to make sure that you have a fiber-rich diet, okay? Because by avoiding being constipated, you stop putting all that pressure on your on your low, on your pelvic floor when you go to the bathroom. So it's really important that you try to have a rich diet, a diet rich in fiber, to try to avoid that problem. The other thing is water intake. It's important to make sure that you have lots of water, and again, that is for two different reasons. So why one is important to make sure that, like I say, you don't have any problems with you don't have any problems in in opening your bowels, so you don't put extra pressure on the pelvic floor, but also because it is avoiding urinary infection as well. And actually, maybe that's less known, but having urine infections often, it can actually lead to incontinence in time, and obviously it impacts on your pelvic floor as well. So those are all important things that women should know, and like I say, particularly after 30. And then yes, of course, there are the Kegel exercises as well, and there's lots of different machinery that kind of helps with that as well, which I'm not saying are not good, but they're not necessary. Okay, you can just learn how to do some Kegel exercises. I do have some courses where I talk about them, but I'm not going to explain them now in detail, but there are different ways where you can do that as well. But like I said, there's lots of other ways that you need to be mindful throughout your life, regarding your pelvic floor. And now the other thing is that obviously it's a bit more specific for women who've been pregnant. Okay, there's this misconception that actually giving birth naturally, it will impact on your your pelvic floor more, which is true, okay, but hear me out, okay? The pregnancy in itself, the fact that you've been pregnant, the fact that you had the hormones of pregnancy actually would have impacted on all of your muscles, okay? Would have made everything a lot looser, and that happened with your pelvic floor as well. So even if you've maybe had a cesarean or you're planning to have a cesarean section, that doesn't mean that your pelvic floor is not being affected in any way. Obviously, the weight of the pregnancy itself as well put extra pressure on that lower part, so that is another thing to sort of be mindful. So even more so, that's why women that are pregnant, are going through pregnancy, are more likely to then have problems with the pelvic floor, not necessarily because they had a vaginal delivery, just the fact that they've been pregnant. So again, make sure that you hydrate yourself, make sure that you have a good diet. Oh, and another thing, you know, I don't know about you, but I tend to fall into that trap as well. I'm certainly noticing my husband doing that. It's, you know, we all have mobiles, so I don't know about you, but the temptation for me in the morning is that, oh, I'm just going to take my mobile as I sit on the toilet for 5 minutes and, you know, just play and check my Facebook and whatever else I might do. And that 5 minutes that I initially planned now turned into 30 minutes. And obviously in that meantime, there was all that pressure that I've put on my lower abdomen, on my pelvic floor. That doesn't help either. It's such a bad habit. It can lead to hemorrhoids and can lead to incontinence, you know, eventually. So that's a very bad habit to have as well, by the way. So going back to the birth process, okay, there are a couple of things. So look, one thing is the phone is a time trap. Absolutely, absolutely, Shells. So yeah, so look, there is during childbirth, okay, there's a couple of things that I would suggest. Well, first of all, to prepare the pelvic floor, and I do this exercise, but I won't do it now, okay, as I speak to you, because it takes a little bit of time, but I'll tell you what it's all about. All right, so basically, if you put your fingers together, you know, your hands together, and you just look at how your fingers sit, okay, you'll see if you try to stretch your thumbs as lower down as you can, okay, obviously because, well, I shall think unless you have any issues, you know, I shall think that they both stretch at the same level with each other, okay, which is a normal thing. But if you massage this area for one of your hands for maybe a couple of minutes, you don't have to do it for very long, okay, you'll notice that by doing this again, you'll notice that actually this finger will stretch lower, okay, just because this muscle down here is being stretched and just by massaging it, okay. So it's the same thing with the pelvic floor. It's made out of muscles. So if we stretch it, if we kind of play with it and make sure that it's nicely and elastic, by the way, this doesn't stay for long, okay? So it goes back to normal. It's just a temporary relaxing of the muscles. So we can do the same thing with the pelvic floor. So from 36 weeks, it is recommended that you try to do some pelvic floor massage. Again, there is a technique. I do talk about it in one of the courses that I do about how to prepare for childbirth. Okay, so but you can just look it up, I suppose. You don't need any special devices to do it. There's some that you can buy, but I don't recommend any because it's, you know, it's free. You can just do it. You just use a bit of oil that you have in your house, or lubricant or whatever you want. So yeah, so you can do that, and it does two things, okay. One, obviously relaxes the muscle of your pelvic floor, which is, like I say, really important for childbirth. And the other thing is it helps you mentally, okay. It helps you as a woman to be a bit more used to that feeling of pressure in your intimate area, shall we say, okay. So it just kind of helps with feeling that sort of slight burning sensation as it happens during childbirth, and so it prepares you mentally to expect that and not to panic when it happens. Because now this takes me to the next point, okay, when you're actually giving birth, it's important that you know that at one point when the head of the baby is sort of what we call crowning, okay, so it's basically just coming through. So imagine this is the vulva, and say the anus would be somewhere here, and this is baby's head, okay. When it's pushing against your external part of the vagina, so your perineum, so that area here that we're talking about, okay, it will feel stingy. You will. I generally, you know, I had a normal birth as well, and obviously I was a midwife by that point, so I knew it. but still that feeling is not nice. Okay, so but if you prepare yourself to it, so that's why it's important to do this pelvic floor massage, so that you know what to expect and you have an idea of how it feels. So the thing is that you need to try to resist the push too hard when you're actually giving birth, okay? Because obviously the sensation of wanting to push is there, and it's very, very strong. It's your body that is saying, right, you know, this baby is now coming and you just have to push with it, and so the baby is born, okay? It's just a normal mechanism that, you know, women will feel during childbirth. But if you do that too forcefully, particularly when the baby's head is coming out, so like I say, during crowning, okay, if you do that too forcefully, what happens is that the baby comes really, really fast and you're more likely to have a tear, okay? So you're more likely for this tissue here, for your pelvic floor to lacerate, okay? Also, if it happens and the doctor, the midwife, whoever is assisting your birth, they think, oh, she's pushing really fast, I can see how he's stretching and it's not going to have enough time, and perhaps there's some problems with the baby's heartbeat and they want to expedite the birth, then they're more tempted to do what we call an episiotomy. So it's essentially the surgical act of actually cutting the area, the pelvic floor. So that's not what we want, okay? As much as possible, you want this area to be intact. It saves us time as well for suturing your back. No, jokes aside. All right, so yeah, so those are the tricks, I would say, regarding the pelvic floor. So look after yourself throughout your life, okay, particularly as we get a bit older. Okay, remember to look after our diet, and you know, quite often it's about like, I want to remain healthy and look good and things like that, which is absolutely, you know, great. You know, obviously we should, but it has so many other different aspects that perhaps we're not necessarily aware of, and how is it going to impact us, okay? So who thought it's like, I'm going to avoid incontinence by eating fiber, but you do, okay? So please try to do so. Drink water, same thing. Like I say, it's important. Avoid sitting on a toilet for very long. That's not a good habit either. All of these small things actually that you do day on, day out, okay, you will just eventually become a habit and you will just be mindful of them and you'll know why you're doing them. So that's why it's important to try and keep that in mind throughout your life, okay? And like I say, obviously when you're pregnant it's slightly different. You need to be even more mindful of all of these things, because during pregnancy in itself, the weight of the pregnancy, the hormones during pregnancy will make you more likely to then have issues with your pelvic floor, which can lead, like I say, to all these other things. So and then during birth, but I suppose by that point then it's a bit less out of your hands. But I suppose, you know, in terms of pushing, you can control it to some extent, or you should be able to control it. So like I say, I do talk about these, you know, pregnancy related a bit more into some of my courses, but you know, that's all I wanted to tell you about and hopefully educate you about today. So I'll leave you with that. Please share it, because I do think this is important information that, like I say, needs to reach as many women as possible. We should be mindful of this regardless if we're pregnant or not, because it has such a big impact, like I say, throughout our lives as women. So please share it with your friends. Please encourage them to follow my page. If you have any questions, do let me know. You can message me directly, you can DM me, or otherwise you can just comment on the video. I will reply to everyone, I promise. So have a good day everyone, and speak to you soon. Take care.